Hello and welcome back to The Mediocre Marketer. I'm your host, Whitney Cowell. Joining me today is Dr. Mark Manera. He's the founder and CEO of Supply Chain Fitness. Welcome, Mark.
Whitney, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for the conversation and always good to catch up with you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. This is going to be a different type of show, and I'm excited about it. And I guess to dive in, I would love to know, what is the biggest mistake that you've made in your career? I'm curious if it's with the business that you've built.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is because I mean, the truth is I am like a couple of years into my career, right? I graduated from physical therapy school about 2.5 years ago. And so I'm super early in my career, but I've already made a whole lot of mistakes. And that's kind of I think when you become an entrepreneur or just like a founder of a company, that the goal is just to like make enough mistakes but learn from those mistakes to keep you alive, and you just keep going, and hopefully you just like don't make the same mistake 2 times in a row, or maybe at least 3 times in a row. Some people, sometimes I've made the same mistake over and over again. And to be honest, I think right now that's been something that I've been thinking a lot about, honestly, and something that when I got started in all of this, and it goes back to some of the marketing, some of the sales as a whole, of there's like this weird balance as a founder and when you're starting a business where it's like they call it in the startup world MVP, right? So minimum viable product, and you put your product out there, and there's a quote in the founders world where it's like, if you're not embarrassed by your first MVP, you put it out too late, right? And so there's this mentality of like, launch your business and just iterate on it, and just like start tumbling down the hill, and hopefully you catch your breath and continue building when you're piling up this momentum, right? And I think something that I went into all of starting Supply Chain Fitness with was, okay, I have this program, we have this base, I kind of set it up, but then now I'm just going to market the crap out of it and just get a whole bunch of people into it and just keep growing. And I didn't take enough time to really build something special and really continue iterating on the product. And I think that I've seen just early on having a lot of people join the program and then having turnover in it because it was cool marketing, we got people in, people got excited, but then the product was good but not great, right? And so I'm like really deep. I've got the whole day blocked out, the rest of the day, of just building a great, amazing product. And I'm actually, I started another business actually that is in the process of being launched as we speak. That's same goal, different pathway of getting there based off of all the mistakes and lessons I've learned over the last 3 years of starting Supply Chain Fitness and working with dozens of trucking companies and a bunch of insurance companies. But I would say really the biggest mistake I've made is I'm not launching too early, but not putting enough effort into when someone's in the product, giving them an amazing experience. And, I always say like, I won't curse, but a mind F experience, right? You want to blow their mind off with the experience that you create.
Right.
And I think a whole lot of people, if we're talking about word of mouth marketing and getting people to refer other people, I think that type of experience is really how you start, just exploding and organically growing over time as well.
Do you think that is shaping what the new business is that you're launching?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it
So what
is.
are you doing differently this time around?
Yeah. So this time around, so I started Supply Chain Fitness was on like the corporate health side of things. So imagine like a general a general fitness, general health personal trainer in the back of a semi truck with a driver, giving them like general exercise and nutrition coaching, specific to their lifestyle. And what I recognized as I was working with all of these companies, and I've been over hands-on with over 1,000 industrial workers, supply chain people in the supply chain over the last couple of years. And the one thing I just continued to see time after time was this explosive surge of chronic diseases across the whole trucking industry. So diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. And really what I recognized was that like we were making an impact with Supply Chain Fitness, but there was really a ceiling to the impact that we could have with a service-based general wellness program. And when you go back to the initial spark of why I started all of this, it was because when I was in a PT clinic working, and that first truck driver walked in the door and shot me through, this whole rabbit hole of the trucking industry, The one stat that I read that completely changed the course of my career was the fact that truck drivers have a life expectancy 16 years less than the average population. And that just like hit me.
That's
And I
wild.
just like, I couldn't believe it. And like, when you look at the data, that means the average truck driver dies at 61 years old. That is
Mm,
nuts. And that's the average. So for every 65-year-old driver out there, we've got a 55-year-old dying. And I just think that's really messed up. I don't think anyone's career should define their health, but as I just gotten deeper and deeper into it, that's exactly what happened. And one of the big core reasons for that, and honestly, just across America as a whole, is that 7 out of every 10 Americans die from a chronic disease like diabetes, like high blood pressure, hypertension. And what I recognized on top of that was, when we were selling, because we are a B2B product, is that 86% of all healthcare costs in the United States are directly associated to those chronic diseases. So the trickle down impact of someone having diabetes, someone being obese, someone having, heart disease, and, the impacts on surgeries, high pharmaceutical costs, medical emergencies, all these different things impact billions and billions of dollars. Across the industrial sector, it's actually $540 billion a year in healthcare costs, which is
oh
like
my
even
gosh.
hard to like count that many zeros, right? And
I'm
so,
imagining like
yeah, and
the
yeah,
long
so
term ramifications of allowing that to continue without taking action.
yeah, exactly, right. And so what I recognized was that the opportunity we have is still to impact the quality of life, to really build something special for the drivers in this industry. And actually now, the vision is to build it across the whole industrial sector, really building a platform for blue collar workers in transportation, but also warehousing, manufacturing, and construction as well over time. But we're really started in trucking and transportation to start. But really build it specifically towards chronic disease prevention and management. So focusing really hardcore on, there's a lot of overlapping principles, but there's some really specific things to helping people cut down, the likelihood of them becoming type 2 diabetic or having uncontrolled high blood pressure. And that's also, from an ROI standpoint, us being able to have a stronger selling point to companies, especially companies who are self-insured on the health insurance side of things, which is a whole other world that we do not have to get into at this moment. But helping them cut down costs and really creating a
Right.
really strong ROI, and creating an opportunity where we can go into a company and align everyone's incentives to say, hey, let's get as many employees on this platform as possible, because we know it's going to drive an ROI to our bottom line. And also all of these other trickle down impacts when we look at our profit and loss statement of turnover, work comp claims, safety behind the wheel, and just truck utilization and absenteeism as a whole.
So, what are some tangible ways that we who maybe are not in the blue collar side, because we also there are a lot of people that have desk jobs, and while
Yeah.
the health impacts are not quite as severe as they are for the truck drivers, we know that, and if not, like, that is just a fact. What are ways that we who are sitting at desks can also take care of ourselves, and then what are you recommending to the truck drivers, just in case if we have
Yeah.
a wide variety of people that are listening to this?
Yeah, and we actually work with everyone. So we've got a decent amount of people in our platform today who work in the office, who are at the executive level, who maybe are a dispatcher or a driver manager and aren't behind the wheel or in a warehouse all day. So I think a lot of people in this industry, just the nature of the supply chain, it's such a hard, demanding industry that a lot of times it's super easy to
Mhm.
put your health on the back burner and
Sure.
not care about yourself. And so how I look at it, and how we work with people, is I look at it as like the hierarchy of needs, right? And it's like the starting base of like, you have to start at the easiest base that covers the biggest ground, and then work your way up. And once you hit the peak, most people listening to this, including myself, don't want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? So it's like there's levels to it that like you don't have to like go on Instagram Reels or TikTok and scroll through all of these crazy, crazy things that people throw out there that like, this is the only way that you can be healthy. It's like, okay, well, let's pump the brakes here. And like, where we
Right.
always start is, 50% of truck drivers don't even have a primary care doctor. So one of the first things that we help every single person do if they're in the office, in the warehouse, or behind the wheel is get a relationship with a primary care doctor that they love, trust, and see at least, on a recurring basis, at least once a year for an annual physical, some blood work, and some preventative screenings. The amount of people that do not do that or haven't gone back to their doctor in 5, 10 years, and from that, are you in that category?
No,
Or
I used
okay, good. Okay, good. I thought you were gonna say but the amount of things that you can a doctor, a primary care doctor can catch just from you consistently going
Mhm.
there. And even if you are healthy, now you have, years of data, of normal data, that then if something does go wrong, they can go back historically and look at all of this stuff that is specific on your blood work,
Right,
on your history, and be able to catch something quicker and faster before, when it's easier to catch. Right. And so that's the first thing that we always do. We always start there. We understand, who's in network, and we help them find someone. So, you're paying for all of these health benefits, but so many people don't take advantage of it. It's just coming out of their paycheck every month. Right. The second thing is medication adherence. 50% of people who have a chronic disease do not take their medication on as their doctor
really, I
prescribed.
didn't know it would be that
Yeah.
big.
And like 30 to 35% of people who get written a prescription by their doctor never fill it at a doctor's office or at a pharmacy. And so the number one thing that you can do if a doctor prescribed you medication to feel better in the moment is take your medication, right? Take it on a consistent basis.
Right, and
Yes,
take
we
all
all
of
can.
it.
Exactly, right? And follow
And
as your doctor prescribed it, right? And I think we all could have the goal of getting off our medication, but there's periods and times and there's seasons where, dude, you're just not at the point where you can do that. And I can run you around the truck, or I can run you around laps and get you working out and eating healthier. But the fastest thing that we can do to make you feel better, which then sets us up for the next step of making some changes to your nutrition and also your, being more physically active, is getting you on a routine where you're taking your medication and you're managing whatever condition that medication is, prescribed to you to handle. And so those are kind of the first two buckets. And then we go into the physical activity and nutrition side of things. And really from there, I focus on really small changes that you can do consistently. I think so many people underestimate what one small change can do compiled on top of each other, done consistently on a daily, weekly, whatever that is to you, consistent is to you, for 2, 3 years, right? And it doesn't even take that long, obviously, to feel the benefits. But really, it's just find something that you enjoy doing from a physical activity standpoint. If it's going on a walk, if it's going to the gym and lifting weights, if it's playing sports, whatever that is, and start doing some of it and do it on a recurring basis. And over time, the goal is to get up and, when you look at the physical activity guidelines for healthy Americans, we want you to get up to around 150 minutes per week of physical activity. That's like a really good North Star to go up to, but you don't have to jump straight to that.
right.
And
It's
so,
interesting that this is, like, the next tier because I feel like that's the tier that people wanna start at, is
yeah,
I feel
yeah,
like it feels harder to make the appointment, to show up, and to potentially be told something might be wrong with you, or you may need to do these things. This, might be something to look for. I feel like that is a scarier step. So we push that off. And instead, you know what, I'm just going to join a gym and then, get on one of the machines and do that. And that it's just interesting to me that the base level, and I agree with you, especially after kind of talking through it, is,
yeah.
first talk to a professional and then start integrating what you need to do with your daily life. Like, first make sure that you're okay where you are and how you are right now, and if not, address that. And
Yeah. Well,
move
and
on to the activities and, like, the lifestyle change.
yeah, exactly. Right. And, again, it's more of an art than a science in some, the coaching side of things, because, if someone's motivated to make a change to their nutrition or become physically active, I'm not going to be like, all right, let's pump the brakes, Whitney. You're going too crazy. I'm going to say, awesome. Let's start here. When we're also doing that, let's also book you a doc. Let's find a primary care doctor that you can go see. And, this week's task is let's book an appointment, even if it's a couple of months out. Right.
Mhm.
And so, like, there's a give and take, but in general, kind of that's how we look at it from a
Yeah.
philosophy standpoint.
It's like
And
that.
then, Yeah, and I think in general, if people have a primary care doctor, they take their medication as they get adhered, they move more than they currently are, and they're eating more fruits and vegetables, they're eating more lean protein throughout the day, and they're eating more fiber and whole grains. A whole lot of other things can happen. You can eat your ice cream, you can eat your pizza on Friday nights, and you're going to be okay, right? And I think so many people just have this mindset with health where it's like it's all or nothing. I gotta switch. I gotta flip my whole lifestyle upside down. I gotta change everything, and it just sets them up to fail and be
It's
unrealistic.
overwhelming to think of it that way.
It is,
And
and
it's
it's
easy
like
to feel like you're failing if you don't do it, like, perfectly, and I think that's, for me anyways, that's what took me a long time to start making specific changes, is I would try to do it all at once, and I was overwhelmed, I was burnt out from it, and then to me, it felt so unsustainable because I did it in a way that was unsustainable.
exactly, right? And I always say to people, I literally was telling this to someone the other day that like, hey, dude, you don't have to hate your life to live a healthy one, right? Like, you don't have to set this. You don't have to hate yourself. Like, you do not have to like restrict yourself. If something I always ask people when we're working and like our coaches ask people is like, hey, what's your non-negotiable, right? Mine is ice cream. My wife and I multiple times a week go and have some ice cream, right? I'm not eating a whole pint of Ben and Jerry's, but I'm having some ice cream because I just enjoy that. And as we're watching, The Bachelor that started last night, and my wife and I are getting into Team Joey, like we're eating some ice cream. That's okay, right? It's a balancing act, and I think just so many people, yeah, there's just so many aspects to it. And the thing with food specifically is that it's not just food is fuel. There's cultural, there's emotional aspects to it. And I think a lot of people, especially in this industry where stress is high, right, especially in these times where the freight
Right.
market is not always up and to the right, it's really easy to use food as a crutch because it changes your body's physiology in the moment, right? It just gives you like a comfort and versus
Mhm.
like going for a walk or doing some breathing exercises, meditating a little bit, or just taking a second, closing your eyes and taking a deep breath. I mean, the amount of times that I do that and that helps me mentally throughout the day is
Oh, yeah.
crazy. But if I didn't, I'd be going down to my kitchen and grabbing, a handful of M&Ms and just going to town because I'm stressed out and I'm just eating it, right?
Yeah. And to your point, there is a mental aspect to this. And I think that, not to say like mental health doesn't matter, because it absolutely does, but I think your mental health impacts your physical health and how you choose to look at it and how you act on it. And that's a totally different narrative. I mean, that's a conversation that we could also, dive into, but it if you go into it with an attitude, like you said, of fear, or from a really negative place, like that self-hatred kind of place, or that place of self-doubt, where you're defeated, where it's you need this. I think that creates a little bit more of that unsustainability. I think that you need to find like a some joy in how you're doing this. Being able to look at it and say, okay, this was a good decision. It builds your self-esteem. And I think, to your point about doing it slowly, I mean, if you're gung-ho, you're gung-ho. That's
Yeah.
great. Some people are like that. Not so much for myself. And many people
Most
that I
people
know,
aren't.
needs to be a little bit at a time, where you can check that off and start building that self-esteem and saying, oh, I can do this. Taking a moment to recognize, oh, I actually do feel better, and allowing that to kind of be the fuel to keep going forward, to take those next steps, to either sustain what you're doing, or to take the next step, in whatever like your program is, to feel good and confident in whatever needs to happen next.
100%. I mean, there's so many rabbit holes that off of what you just said I could go down, and like my brain is like I'm like squirrels all over the place looking at this different thing because like number one, I completely agree. Mental health and physical health go hand in hand. A
Yeah.
lot of the times, if one is going in a bad direction, if you want to put it that way, the other one is oftentimes following, right? And I think if you're listening to this podcast, then more likely than not, you're at least in your mid 20s, maybe up, right? Closer to 30s, 40s, 50s, if you're listening to this. But I think starting even as teens in America and just in North America as a whole, because of our culture and diet culture as a whole, we all start having like these body issues, right? We look in the mirror and we're like, I don't really like how I'm looking. Like I'm going to go on a diet. Then you go on Google or you go on TikTok and you're like, oh, this is the diet. I need to try keto. I need to try low fat. I need to go on Weight Watch or whatever it is. And, you go and you just like completely do this 180. And then when you fail, or when you get off of it because you set yourself up to fail and you weren't sustainable, it mentally feels like a failure.
Yeah.
And so many people in their 30s, 40s, 50s have like 20, 30, 40 of these failed attempts built up in their head.
Yeah.
And the next time they try to go do it, they're almost like defeated before they even get started because they're like, well, it's this again, right? And it's like, well, have you tried everything in the world? Have you taken a different approach? Maybe, putting the pedal to the metal is not the best approach. Maybe we
Right.
just need to like ease into it. And, I always talk to drivers in general of like, imagine like yourself after a road trip. If I go on an 8-hour road trip, the last thing I want to do after I get done driving for that long is go in, have a nice salad, have, some grilled chicken, eat some fruit, then go for a run, right? I want a burger. I want fries. I want to like veg out and watch Netflix, right? And you've got this like trucking and a lot of people, even, in the broker world and sitting behind a computer in the supply chain, it's like
Mhm.
the job is more mentally taxing than it
Yeah.
is physically taxing. And that is a really tough combo to have a mentally taxing day on top of a 180 flip in your whole lifestyle, where when you're mentally taxed, all you want to do is go back to your habits that you're feel comfortable because that's your crutch, right? And so if you try to completely change it, yeah, you've got, people in the world who are, on David Goggins level of just like cursing at the world and like, I know, making their world their bitch. And sorry, I cussed there. My bad. But but most people, it's like you just gotta focus. All right, I've got my one task for the day. We call it like our daily health check. This is the only thing I want you to work on, right? Just focus on that. Let's check it off, and we'll just build it up over time.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal advice. And I'm curious to know, what advice would you have for somebody who maybe is not part of your program, that does have more of a sedentary job, that's looking to start, making changes, or to maybe encourage the people around them? Like, how can we start integrating and encouraging that in the workplace?
Yeah, I think the first thing would be, do you have a primary care doctor? Go back and get an annual physical, get some blood work. Are you taking your medications as your doctor recommended? So many people are confused because they go in and their doctor's in there for like 7, 8 minutes, and then they get written a prescription, and then they get kind of shoot out because they've got another patient coming in. And so making sure you understand that, and then from the exercise and nutrition lifestyle perspective of, think to yourself, look at your day-to-day life. I think a lot of people in general have, this gut feeling or in their head can look at a day-to-day life and say, all right, what's like the low-hanging fruit where I can make some of these changes and it really wouldn't make this huge impact to my day-to-day life. And I think those small changes are a really good starting point. And in general, I like, just from a psychological standpoint of, I like the approach of adding things versus subtracting things. I think
Mm.
focusing on, hey, I'm going to eat more fruit. I'm going to eat more vegetables. I'm going to add protein to my day. So many people don't eat protein every single day. It's crazy to me. It's like the number one thing as we're getting older, the number one thing you can do to keep your quality of life, along with being physically active, quality of life up. I'm gonna eat more whole grains. I'm gonna drink more 0-calorie beverages. Whatever it is, I think, flipping it in that, putting it in that constraint versus I'm
Mhm.
gonna stop eating sweets, or I'm gonna stop drinking soda, or I'm gonna stop eating fried foods. I think that's, just kind of one of those, like, you tell someone not to touch something, and the first thing they want to do is go touch it,
Don't
right?
touch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that advice. And, like I said, I am now somebody who sees a doctor regularly. Um,
Nice.
and one of the things that I learned along my path is that I needed to have a nutritionist. I just did not know how to have like a healthy relationship with food and what that was supposed to look like. And I had all of these issues that needed to be addressed, and I just didn't know where to start. And it turns out it was just as simple as changing a few things in my diet. And I very much had oh, I need to take this away. I can't do this anymore. And it felt so restrictive that all I did was just crave the sweets and
Yeah.
the fried things. And those, the fried things were one of the things that were not great for me. But changing the way I was looking at it, and what the advice that I was given is, think of having, for me, it was 4 colors a day. How can you make that happen in
I
your
like
routine?
that.
And that made eating like fun for me. And then when I was a remote employee, I would try like new things every week. I would go to the grocery store, I would pick a food that I'd never had before, and I would try to make something with it. And
That's
then I
great.
kind of fell in love with not just like I can't say I fell in love with nutrition. That would be a huge lie. But what I fell in love with was trying new things along this journey and learning like
Yeah.
how I responded to it. And some of that, now years later have sat with me, and it's really shaped the way that I kind of view wellness. Now I'm not as afraid to go to the doctor. And I know that sounds stupid, but I was really afraid because of like
Yeah.
family history of what
Hmm.
may crop up. And now, instead of being scared that that might happen, I feel more prepared and more confident that if it does, I have somebody in my corner that can help me tackle that head on. And I think that it is a process to get to that point. And, it
It
takes
is.
kind of being gentle with yourself
Yes.
as you start making changes in your life.
Don't be your worst enemy, right? It's like so many people just, yeah, like I said, set themselves up to fail, or their worst critic. And,
Mhm.
you would never talk to other people, or talk to your spouse, or talk to your kids the way you talk to yourself sometimes
Right,
mentally, right?
right.
And, I think, talking about like how you did it, the 4 colors, I love that. Like so many times health is not fun. And I think adding some fun, gamifying it in a way is like, yeah, it just makes it more enjoyable, right? And I think the other aspect is like looking at foods, not of like this is a bad food, this is a good food, but looking at foods as this is a food I should eat more of. This is a food I should eat sometimes. This is a food I should eat less of, right? And it's like I'm choosing to eat less of fried foods, and I'm choosing to eat more, baked foods, or however you want to look at it, right? And
Right.
it's not like you're punishing yourself if you slip off because you ate some fried chicken.
Yeah. Especially in the workplace, like if you're in an office, it's really easy to feel like bad about certain choices that you make. If it's a really busy day and you didn't pack your lunch that day, like I hope that nobody feels discouraged in those kind of choices, because sometimes it happens. Like it doesn't mean that you've, like you said, it doesn't mean you failed.
Yeah, no, exactly, right. And like, the other aspect is like, in this industry, so many people go to conferences, and like you get to conferences and there's free drinks, there's free food, there
Snacks
sweets,
everywhere.
snacks and food, yeah, sitting everywhere. And it's like, man, I'm gonna have a cookie, I'm gonna have a drink. It's okay, right? And like that's the worst part about being the fitness guy in the industry, is when I walk up and start talking to people at conferences about what I do. All of a sudden they like start leaning away. They're like hiding their food from me
Hiding their
because they're
bags
like,
of popcorn.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I think way more people just need to focus on like, hey, what's the one thing I could add to habit wise to my day to day routine, and let me just work on that for a couple of weeks and then see how that goes.
Um, Well, I appreciate a lot of the advice that you've given. It's been great hearing your story, but also how you've approached the industry, because I think health and wellness, specifically in the supply chain, specifically because of the types of jobs that a lot of us have, both the blue collar and the white collar side, it's just an overlooked niche. And so I'm glad to have people like you that are advocating for not just the mental health, but the physical health as well. Like you said, they go hand in hand. It's a really important conversation to have.
Well, I really appreciate it. Yeah, enjoying the conversation, and always good to catch up with you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me today, Mark. It has been a pleasure. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time. That's all she